Okay, the next challenge for leadership as it's currently comprised in the church would be impacting the marketplace. In the Gospels, there are 130 references to Jesus interacting with people. Of these, only 10 were in church, temple and synagogue, while the remaining 120 were out in the community, where Jesus spent his time modeling to his disciples how to interact with people of all kinds. He lived a life of grace and truth in the midst of the people outside the doors of the established faith community. When you think about it, when people look to improve their lives, what do they look to? They really look to the marketplace. Right? You might say they look to education, but they look to education so that they can get qualified to get a job or trained to get a job. People really place their hope in the marketplace to improve their lives. The marketplace is the only human institution that touches everybody, both directly and indirectly. People seek the marketplace to improve their lives and their circumstances. The 6 pillars of the marketplace: education, corporate and private business. I sort of put subcategories: medical, pharmaceutical, and sports are huge. Global and economic finance. It should just be global economic finance. Politics and government, non-profit, non-governmental agencies, and multimedia and global communications. I was recently at a missions conference that was called Intersections. And this missions conference was like none I'd ever been before. Usually you have a missionary speaker, or you have a certain emphasis, the great cities of the world, or the unreached people of the world, or the Muslim world, or the Buddhist world. There's usually a theme or something. At this missions conference, it was divided into these 6 groups. And you had to choose which one you were going to go to. And that whole part within the conference, all those seminars were around how to make kingdom impact in that domain. I thought that was a very innovative way to do it. That was a whole different way to approach missions. To look at how you can, they had me doing the education one. But I think that's the way even missions thinking is starting to change. There's been a huge divide, between church and the marketplace, generally speaking. You leave your job to go into the ministry, right? Because you can't do ministry in the business world. You got to leave that behind. Right? The better road is to go into the church, go into church work. The church marketplace has generally been seen as sort of the bottom of the totem pole. I had one friend who's a Christian businessman who was so irked because just about this time of year last year, right, school's getting ready to start again, so he called it up, the pastor called up to the congregation, well, all the school teachers in our congregation, please come forward. Starting a new school year, had a special blessing over the teachers, doing God's work, raising, our children of our community, and a special blessing. And he's like, why hasn't that pastor ever called the businessmen up? We're making jobs. We're improving people's lives. We're improving the community. You never call the business people up, right? Because they're not really doing God's work. The teachers are. The doctors are. The missionaries are. The businessmen. We don't honor them in the same way in the church at all. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Right? Marketplace seems what you leave to into the ministry. Churches celebrate pastors, teachers, doctors as doing God's work, but generally not business people. God is working in a unique way in the marketplace, independently, spontaneously, and globally. There are now 1,200 organizations that exist to network or minister to those in the marketplace. Leading missiologists, evangelical leaders, and secular media are starting to recognize it and starting to come up, rise in different magazines. this magazine called Business Reform is about reforming your business to make a kingdom impact. And there's a whole magazine out on it. Enterprising businessmen are starting to develop kingdom companies. Right? Triple bottom line they talk about. We want to make a profit. It's a real business. They want to have a community impact, and they want to have a kingdom impact. And they're starting to reform their businesses to do it. This movement is largely happening independently from the church. This movement really is not currently being driven to any great extent by current church leaders. The formative stages of this are rather chaotic, and there's a lot of different views about it. It's going to take a change of perspective for the church to begin to embrace this kind of marketplace ministry. When you read through the Bible through marketplace eyes, you notice how many references Jesus makes to the marketplace to teach spiritual truths. Right? Just tell me a couple.
He talks about in Matthew 24, he talks about the good stewards.
Yep.
The vineyard owner.
Well, when he's not in the synagogue and, maybe not marketplace, but he's always in the village. He's at someone's home. He's always moving through with the crowds. And in their setup, marketplace was not.
Any references to farmers? Any references to shepherds? Yeah. This is all people doing their work.
That's where the disciples came from.
Fishing. Quit their business and went to the church and Jesus, right?
We need to begin to view work as a marketplace as a vehicle and forum, that probably should say, of ministry. Mobilizing lay people for marketplace ministry. God is using globalization in unreached nations, right? Right now, there's a lot of countries, including China, you cannot go as a missionary. But boy, they'll welcome you as a businessman, right? There needs to be a change of thinking to de-emphasize this sort of secular sacred divide and the adoption of the belief of the priesthood of all believers and the belief that one can be a successful business person and an obedient follower of Jesus Christ. There's several forms of marketplace ministry going on. It helps to define the terms a little bit. The first one is sort of an outside the marketplace into the marketplace. This would be a pastor or a layman having a Bible study or other ministry in the marketplace. So I'm a believer, and I work down at, where do I work? I work at Boeing, and I've made it. I've gotten permission, and every Monday morning I have an hour Bible study, and anybody in my division is able to come. It's kind of the outside in, or I'm a pastor that goes down and I have a Bible study at Boeing. I don't really belong there, but I'm going there to have an impact. So you're crossing the barrier from the church into the marketplace by doing that. The second one would be tent making, and Paul makes a minor reference to doing this at certain times during his ministry, so it wouldn't be a burden to those that he was preaching to. Now it's taken on the meaning of going to another culture. You're trained as a missionary, but it's not a culture. Maybe it's a Muslim country that will not allow you to be in there as a religious professional on a religious professional visa. And so you're there as a teacher or whatever. But really, you're there. You might even actually get all your funds from a mission organization, but you really sort of have this job as a cover for what you're doing. Then there's what is generally called marketplace ministry, and that is I have a job and I see my coworkers as my mission field. Right? View your job and workplace as a mission field, seeking to serve and influence your coworkers for Christ. So that's the standard view of marketplace ministry. And then the new one that's really coming on strong is this whole idea of kingdom companies, where people have venture capital and they want to create one of these triple bottom line. And we're dealing this is the fastest growing part of China ministry right now. Last year we had our China event in Southern California, and we had 100 people come for a whole extra day just on marketplace ministry in China. It's a super hot topic right now. And it's amazing what God is laying on the hearts of really wealthy men. There was one guy that we met and we began to unpack this for him, and he's like, I've been waiting for something like this for 2 years. Feeling that there was more. I've got business expertise, I've got capital, but he said, you just opened the door. This is what I've been waiting to do. And we can introduce them to people who are already doing it, so we have enough to reinvent the wheel. This group, though, and in fact, in having that one extra day, they're kind of saying, you know what, you put us in with the regular church people, and that was nice, but we would rather just meet with people like us. We'd rather just meet with businessmen. Because the religious people are nice, but they're not down, get it done people the way we are in a business sense. And they're probably not going to be all that much help to us. The goal is a God-honoring business that has a spiritual impact on its employees and vendors. Business as mission is another phrase that's being used a lot. Companies supporting Christian service projects. Setting up businesses to help people in poverty, microloans. In China, there was a very successful goat operation where they would buy a number of goats and give it to one farmer, and the deal was, when those goats bred, he would give several of the goats back so that it could be done to another farmer. Just an idea of seed goats that would allow these things to multiply. And it's a business that's meant to bless people, and it was set up by Christians to be a blessing. Providing tractors for Kazakhstan. I have a friend who does that. Training unemployed youth, providing medical services in the inner city. These are different examples of what businesses are doing to have a mission. And sending teams to build churches in Mexico. I have a friend who owns a business, and every year he gives his employees, it doesn't count as vacation time. He lets them go down there, and they do that every year. And he feels like that's part of the mission of his business. And I think there could be an increase in this in the Bill Gates effect. Right? Bill Gates has got, he's basically being done with the phasing out the business side so he can do philanthropy full time. And I think it's going to make philanthropy kind of in again when people like him are doing it. And I think Christian businessmen who sort of, I have my business and then I go to church, they're starting to think a little bit more broadly. It's exceedingly strange that any followers of Jesus Christ should ever have needed to ask whether social involvement was their concern. And the controversy should have blown up over the relationship between evangelism and social responsibility. John Stott has said. Now, this is causing a lot of problems. One is the not-profit and for-profit divide. A lot of traditional mission agencies have had a great challenge going into places like China and Indonesia, places where you can't go as missionaries. So they sent, the first wave was missionaries who were really who were posing as something else. But that kind of runs thin because missionaries aren't good businessmen. They've not been trained to be, and so they don't do very well, and that affects their witness. So the second wave that's coming now are people who want to set up for-profit businesses, Christian businessmen. But what do you do with the missionary paradigm of having churches give to? That kind of messes that all up, doesn't it? Yeah. And if a donor church realizes that this mission agency is starting for-profit businesses, wait a second. I'm not sure I want to give the Lord's money for you to start, a factory in the middle of China, right? That's not what I signed up for, right? So this is causing a great identity crisis among current mission organizations. And you can see how difficult it would be to explain that to a donor base that is been trained to give in a certain way for a certain thing. Right? Do you have donor-supported for-profit businesses? What is the goal here? Is it societal impact and transformation, or is it church planting? Teach a man to fish, right?
Yeah.
But start a fishing business, and you feed many families and build communities. We had a man in southern China who was a pioneer in setting up businesses. He went in the mid '80s, and he was one of the first people really to be an actual businessman that wanted to go into China and start a business. And we had him speak last May in Bangkok to our China consultation. And if you ever doubted whether a businessman was really a legitimate ministry, this guy would have completely won you over. He went in, he has a stained glass business. They make Tiffany lamps, and they do stained glasses for churches too. They do it in China. It's all made in China. And he started this business, and he started having an outreach to the beggars in the city that he was in China. And he'd meet these beggars, and he'd say, "No, I can't give you any money, but if you come down to the factory, I'll give you a job." And so some of them would show up at the factory, and he'd have them just start sweeping. And he'd sort of get to know them, and a lot of them, when they first came, they were very deranged and everything, and after a while, with a little structure in their life, they seemed to become more lucid, and a number of them would come to Christ, and the church in the city came to him and said, "Thank you so much for doing something with the beggars, because we can't do anything." He had a reputation among the beggars there. He said he said, "I was sitting in a restaurant, I was outside, and a beggar came by, and I said to him, 'No, I can't give you any money, but here's my card. If you come down to the factory, I'll give you a job.' And the guy said, 'Oh,' he said, 'I've heard about you.' And he walked off. And a few minutes later, he came back with a bottle of wine. And he said, 'I wanted to give you this bottle of wine. Thank you for what you've done for the beggars in this community.'"
Did you say the churches said they couldn't?
The church said, "Thank you for helping the beggars, because we couldn't help. There's nothing we could do in there."
Interesting that they said
No. And so this guy has gotten, for the last 7 years, this is a foreigner in China, got a government award for having one of the best companies to work for. And so he is beginning to show them what it means to run a business, to treat your people well. And people love, to work at his company. And he has gone through unbelievable spiritual warfare. He has had threats on his life. He's had threats on his children's lives. He's gone through some unimaginable things. Talk about a calling, keeping somebody somewhere. But when you hear him tell his story, you almost sit there and think, there's no way a church could do what this guy does, have the kind of impact this guy does. It's really amazing. He's a very cool guy. There is, in China right now, there's a vision called Back to Jerusalem. And that is a vision among the Chinese believers that right now the largest revival in the history of Christianity is taking place in China. I'm not sure whether you knew that or not, but the largest revival in the history of Christianity is taking place in China today. They have a vision. They believe this is happening because the torch of the gospel, it came up in the Middle East. It didn't go into Asia. The locus of historical Christianity went to Europe, North Africa, then came around America, the big revival in Latin America. Then, the percentage-wise, the biggest Christian nation in the world is Korea, right? And now China. And they're saying, we believe that, the Chinese believers say, we believe that the torch is being passed to us, and it's our job to take it down the old Silk Road, through the Central Asian republics, through the Middle East, and back to Jerusalem. That we are going to be the ones that will finish the job of world evangelization. And we think about how effective Americans are going to be in the Middle East. In Muslim countries, really not very effective, right? But the Chinese are already there. You know, a friend of mine this past spring came back from Baghdad. He had opportunities. He was looking for some ministry stuff in Baghdad, and I had taken him to China before. And he said, when I was in Baghdad, I met these two young Chinese guys. And, I was from China. I was, Chinese guys in Baghdad. So I went up to them, started talking with them, and asked them what their names was and what they were doing there. And they said, well, I'm Joshua, and this is Caleb, and we were sent by our house church network to spy out the land. And they're going to do what every good Chinese person does. They're going to open a Chinese restaurant. And they're going to use that to get visas to begin. They said our house church network is already training people to follow us, and we're going to plant churches. We're going to share the gospel in Baghdad. So they're already doing it. The businessmen that we're dealing with that are doing these kingdom companies, they said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to get together with our Chinese brothers who have this vision, and let's plant businesses down the old Silk Road as a way to employ and provide visas and finances to fulfill the Chinese vision of taking the gospel back to Jerusalem. That's unheard of thinking in the history of missions.
And who's
the
doing
businessmen would partner to do a missionary enterprise like that.
Who's doing it?
Quite a number of people are doing it.
But I mean,
yeah, if you come out to Colorado, I'll introduce them to you in
October. I
October.
mean, like Progressive Vision, are they doing that? That's not where they're driving.
No, that's not what they're doing. These are largely businessmen who are not aligned with either churches or traditional mission agencies, because the traditional mission agent can't handle it.
But it sounds like a partnership of some kind would be more effective than these individuals out trying to
manage it. That's what we're doing.
How
That's why we had that extra day. That's why we're building a network.
How are they connected in communication? This all has to be underground there, right?
No. Really? Not really. Because if you go and try to start a church in China, it'll be shut down right away. If you start a business and during Sunday your business isn't open, but you allow people to meet there, government's not going to bother you. And you're bringing in tax money, you're providing jobs, they'll look the other way.
Are you looking at privately held companies?
Yeah.
And stock exchange companies?
Well, both. Yeah, both.
So the stock exchange companies looking at it as part of their portfolio of supporting the community, or how are they justifying that to stockholders?
Yes, that would be part of that whole goodwill philanthropy part. But for the most part, since we're dealing with the first wave of this, it's mostly entrepreneurial businessmen and venture capitalists. Yeah. So the job of world evangelization might be done by businessmen. And then the next wave of missions. Chinese church is looking for business as mission partners to start businesses all along the way to support and facilitate this massive evangelistic effort. So, does the church have a role here at all? I think it does. I think it does. Casting vision for this, equipping people, getting them to see their business, the marketplace, their job as their mission field, equipping them, encouraging them, motivating them, coaching them, nurturing them, networking them. Right? That's what China Source is doing. Yeah. Right now there is a Christian China businessman's chamber of commerce in Beijing. So for a Christian businessman wants to open and do something in China, there's a place where he can go. The head of that, the new head of that is a friend of mine. I met about 20 years ago in China.
You get Walmart hooked into this.
and China Source, like I said, the fastest growing sector of what we do is the businessmen. And we're trying to figure out what to do with them, because again, they're starting to say, we said, come in the mix of the other China ministry folks, and they're saying, yeah, that was nice, but we're ready to go. So we want to talk with other people who are ready to go.
There's a family in our church, they're in China, he's a veterinarian, and there's some businessmen that are from New Zealand and Australia that want to start a large cattle farm
for-profit cattle farm, because agriculture is big. There's risky animals there, and so they went down the land and bought a lot of acres. Can't remember the exact numbers of it, but it's up and going. Not only are these businessmen doing it, making business, but also there's students coming in from universities around the U.S. and also Europe that go in and spend time 3 months, and they're Christian college university students who have that kind of stuff, and so they go to visit alongside the Chinese on this farm with this vet producing a hybrid beef that would be able to service Asia and the Middle East. And that's our target. Asia and the Middle East is the target, yeah.
Perfect example.
That brings up economics and logistics, elements, marketing.
So, how do we train missionaries now? Do we send them to Bible college and then the master's degree and MDiv and then the DMin so that they're really no practical use to anybody? A lot of the mission agencies in sending these people, they're having to readjust their requirements. A lot of them, in fact, I'm surprised that we haven't done this yet, but a lot of seminaries have a 1-year Bible certificate because the mission agencies are saying, well, you got to have something, but we won't make you go through a whole, because you're not going to be a traditional church plant. We won't make you go through the whole pastor, you learn Greek thing, but we want you got to have something. So a lot of the seminaries, particularly mission-oriented ones, have just 1-year Bible certificate degrees that satisfies the requirements of some of the mission agencies. But yeah, the mission agency, they're scratching their head over this. All right, this is big, it's huge, it's here. We don't know what to do with it.
That's a piece for distance learning for each of the churches.
Marketplace ministry and business as mission is the major missions movement of the new century. And this is a gentleman named Neil Johnson. He has a center for marketplace ministry. It's out of a seminary in Mississippi, actually. I'll have to look that up. And he's acting, there are people like him, and he's using his center to act as a network for these kinds of people. And they have meetings all over the place. We partnered that extra day that we did last year. We partnered with a group called, they're right here, World Christians Through Business.org. And there's another website called repurposing.biz. And there's several. I need to do some more research here to get some more books. But I just threw one on there called Great Commission Companies. I have a copy of that in my office. But this is a new trend, and it's a new challenge for church leaders, right? How do we help what God's doing here?
Does the new approach allow for the mission workers themselves to be paid by the business, or do they have to go raise their own money?
Right now, there's different models. When I went, the mission agency had a certain level of support that I needed. When I was in China, I was going to teach. It wasn't my teaching salary was not going to pay everything, because the mission agency wanted me to come out twice a year to conferences, and there was more stuff I had to do. So what they said, okay, here's your level of support. We'll subtract the amount you're getting from your salary at your job, and that's what you have to raise right there. But still, I had to do a lot of explaining to my supporting churches. Well, do you have a job? Yes, but this is my level, and this is what and so I need to raise the rest there. And some of this gentleman I told about in South China, he can give a certain number of visas to foreign workers, and it's really more than he needs. So he'll let a couple missionaries come in and use his work visas, but in fact they don't really do anything at the factory. They're just doing ministry all the time. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman who he has a little device that it's kind of like a radio, but you put a small memory chip in it, and he makes them really cheap in China, and the U.S. government ordered 1 million of them because they wanted to use them in Iraq for democracy training. So, they give each family one of these, and it's cheap, and they could turn it on. They could take the chip out, and you could actually download other stuff on it. It wasn't exactly an MP3 player. It was a toned-down version of that.
They had one of the shows on AMA 20 had that special.
I might have one in my office. He gave me one. But anyway, the guy who got the contract to do this, the American government is paying for it, he makes these in China. Now, the factory allows them to have, like 7% defects, so just write off 7% that are defective. Well, he runs a very good company, and really only 2% are defective, so he takes 5% that have already been paid for, and he's put Chinese Bible training stuff, and since they're made in China, he's distributed them through the house churches. So there's a lot of wacky, creative things going on out there that genuine business can lead to. Does make you say, doesn't it? And then you think, okay, what can we do as pastors, as church leaders to help cast vision for this and equip people in a new way to take advantage of these opportunities. Okay, I think we're done that one. Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling. We have one more of these to do, and it's kind of related. Let's look at the new paradigm in missions. Another challenge to the church, and I've already touched on a lot of it in talking about marketplace ministry. Okay, what was the old paradigm? Okay, the old paradigm was the church sends people, ordained, seminary-trained religious professionals that left their professions to go into the ministry and be church planters or whatever. And the church also gives money, usually in the form of personal support or, in some cases, denominational contributions. Right? So what is the church responsible to do? Sort of find those kind of weird people that have a call to the mission field, whatever that is, and hurry them off. What was the mission agency? What did they do? The mission agency then received these missionaries. They had the field expertise, and they had the mission strategy. Right? They would then tell this missionary where to go. We want to plant a church in this region, so we're sending you there. And they would do the care. They'd set up a school for them to study language. They would have pastoral care on site. They might have operate a sort of missionary vacation home that they could go to for rest and that. So the mission agency was responsible for the field expertise, the missionary strategy, and missionary care. What was the job of the missionary? Okay, the job was to enter on a missionary visa, learn the language, and plant a church. Right? I go there and I plant a church the way you plant churches. I have an evangelistic campaign, hopefully win a few converts, rent a storefront, have public service, try to win more converts, try to train the few I have here, develop the leaders, and to turn over this ministry to the nationals eventually. This is one area where missionaries have not always been that good. I remember I was at one missionary convention in Washington, D.C. It was a pretty big one. There were some Latin American leaders there. And the one very prominent Latin American church leader got up and said, I really want to thank the Western American missionaries who brought the gospel to the country and the sacrifice and we are forever grateful and in your debt. The one issue that I have, though, is that you stayed a little bit too long. Okay, that's a whole other class, though. All right, so what's changing about this, right? That makes sense, shouldn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Isn't that the way it works? That's the way it works.
Yeah.
Okay, everything's changing. Yeah.
Sorry to bother you, I was looking for the title so I could pull it up.
This one's called New Paradigm.
New missions.
New missions paradigm. Is it on there?
Yep.
If not, I'll get it to you. Okay, several things that are causing the shift now. One is the Perspectives course. Actually, in the course that I taught back in January, called Leading for Global Impact, I used materials from the Perspectives course. The Perspectives course was a course that was developed at the U.S. Center for World Mission and is being taught in churches all over the country. And it is wonderful and absolutely life-changing. And they have it every year. They usually have it in the winter months, like February through March or April. They have it on the peninsula. They have it up in Auburn. They haven't actually had one in Tacoma, but they have it in this area. I'd love to teach it. It talks about the history, the theology, and current trends in missions, and the kind of thing that after you go through that course, you're like, I've got to do something. I've got to get involved in this. And it really ends up being a turning point for a lot of people. The great thing about the Perspectives course is that laymen now are understanding missions and getting turned on to it. Not just pastors, but laymen is who this course is aimed at. And the course has been wildly successful, and it's being taught all over the country. I love to teach it. Every chance I get, I teach Perspectives. Last year I went out to Spokane and Tri-Cities and taught it out there. So now when a missionary comes into an average church, there's a lot of laymen who can walk up and speak to them very intelligently. Are you doing a P1 evangelism among an unreached people group in the 1040 window? So they're like, how did you know even to ask me that question, There's just a higher level of awareness of the missionary task, of what an unreached people group is, and then those laymen are kind of saying to their church leaders, hey, why aren't we involved in this? And all of a sudden churches are developing more missions programs that are really informed. The second is the rise of, particularly in the Caucasian churches, of missions pastors. Right? This is, are any of you in a church or ever been in a church with a missions pastor? It really is a relatively new trend. It started in the 1980s. And this was somebody who was hired full-time to develop a strategy for the church to be involved in world missions. I deal with missions pastors all the time now. That's their job. A friend of mine took a missions pastor role at a large church in Philadelphia, and they let him preach the first day, the first week he was hired, and he got up and he said, I do not want you to view me as a missions pastor. I want you to view me as a human resources developer who is going to hold each and every one of you accountable for what you're personally doing to fulfill the Great Commission. Yeah. Stunned silence. He was there for a good long time, and he really did a lot with that. At one point, I think they had upwards to 65% of the church within his first 5 years had been on some kind of mission project. It might have just been, they went from the suburbs of the inner city, or it might have been they went to Mexico, or if he really did mobilize that, and it really changed that church, it changed their giving patterns, it really revolutionized that church. But now you have the role of the mission pastor is to develop a strategy for the church. How are we going to be involved in missions? That's different, right? Before, this weird person with a missionary call, you just send them off to the mission agency. And now you've got a guy saying, the church is going to start doing mission strategy. Right? That used to be the purview of the mission agency. Now churches that are very sophisticated, particularly some of these mega churches, they've got money, they've got vision, and they're getting involved in some amazing things. So now the churches are wanting to get directly involved, and they're kind of going past the mission agencies, and they're setting up their own sending structures from the church. There was one guy at a missions conference that I was at, and he talked about their church's training program for missionaries. It was an 18-month training program. They developed a team that had practical resources. The goal was to plant this team among an unreached people group, and they had the skills to get jobs and eventually be self-sufficient. The church would send them out, but over time decrease their giving so the team could become self-sufficient. He said for the 18 months they were not allowed to go to the mother church. They had to meet in a home house church because that's what they were going to do when they got on the field. And we did theological training with them. We did missions training with them. We gave them cross-cultural experiences. And then we researched, and this church sent this team to Turkey. Muslim culture, and they planted this team in Turkey. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, well, you just usurped the role of the mission agency, didn't you? What do you need a mission agency for, right? You're church-based, you did it all. He said, oh no, I need the mission agency. And I'll tell you in a minute what he needed them for. Okay, so another challenge that is really impacting the way missions is done is what they call CANs, the lingo, Creative Access Nations, countries that welcome skilled workers but not religious professionals. Right? So you cannot go in as a missionary, but you can go in businessman, teacher, doctor, that kind of thing. That is forcing missions to operate differently. Right? The way I just described marketplace ministry, right? You get that. Okay, strategy coordinators. The role of the missionary is changing. It used to be what? You go to plant a church. Now, the new paradigm is strategy coordinators. The missionary role is now not to plant a church, but to see that the church is planted among an unreached people group, UPG, unreached people group, or a city through multiple partnerships. Okay, so it used to be, I'm going to go and plant and pastor a church as my missionary role. Now, okay, I have a vision for this city where there are no known believers, not a one. Okay, what am I going to do to see the kingdom come to this city? And who am I going to partner with? Say I'm doing this in a tribal area. They don't have the Bible in their language. Okay, my first thing is I'm going to go and partner with Wycliffe because they're the Bible translators. And I'm going to partner with World Vision because they come in and do community development, and that'll create a lot of goodwill for Christians. And then I'm going to bring in, and so you begin to develop partnerships because your vision is to see the kingdom come to that city, to the businessmen, to the orphans, to the beggars, to the politicians, to the police, to the taxi drivers. You want to see the kingdom come in every domain in that city and among that people group. That's a very different role than I'm here to be a pastor of a church. Mm-hmm. And you train a strategy coordinator very differently than you train a pastor who is planting a church. So the missionary role now means they've got to be facilitators, they've got to be partnership builders. That's why I'm so big on partnerships. It's a whole course in the spring about it. Because that is what's going to fulfill that task. So now the goal is church planting movements, which is a harvest strategy based on obedient conversion and the discipleship of laymen. And that's largely how the church is growing in China, where there's an official church, but the explosive growth is just house churches. And the challenge of discipling and raising up leaders. The missionary task is going from the ordained to the ordinary. Right? Using business as people, using their skill set here and taking it and using it and connecting with people with that same skill set over there. I was at one of my supporting churches in Sacramento, and they were recruiting for some corporate trainers. They wanted to have some missionaries on the field, wanted to have an outreach to businessmen, so they wanted to bring some top-level people over, in business-savvy people, to do some seminars as a way to make inroads. And so there's a picture of a corporate boardroom, kind of like this, the guy with the laser pointer and the laptops and all. And it was at the missions thing. And so I was sitting there talking, and this lady comes by, very professionally dressed. And she walks by and she looks at it, and she does a total double take. And then she looks up to see what, it was in the courtyard, the children's ministry over here, youth ministry over here, missions over here. And so she looked up to see what it was, and she saw that it was missions. And she looks back down, and she looks back up. She said, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, from what I understand, that the church is getting a team of business people together to conduct seminars as an outreach." And she's got this blank look on her face. And she looked up and she said, "This is missions?" I said, "Yeah, it's a short-term missions team. I think they're going for like 10 days or 2 weeks." And she's like, "Well, this is what I do. I'm a corporate trainer. My company flies me all over the country, and I can do this." Yeah, you could. She never thought of herself, ever, as a missionary. Pith helmet, hut, eating slugs. Never. But here, I can take my skills, and I can go to another country and meet somebody who has the same skills and instantly have a connection and impact them for Christ. There was a lady in our church who was a hairdresser, and her name was Diane. She's only a Christian, like less than 2 years. And I said, "Diane, I just want to throw an idea out at you. See what you think about this. What if," I said, "I know a missionary in a city in China. What if that missionary made up a flyer and passed it around to all the hairdressers in the city that an American hairdresser was coming over to give some demonstrations?" I said, and we sent you to China. You spent your first couple days, going to the Great Wall, seeing the sights. And then the second week, you'd go there, and we rent a small hall, and we have maybe 5 or 6 people who were guinea pigs who didn't mind having their hair done. And you just went from head to head, and you did a different style on each one, and explained how you do it and why this is popular in America, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end, said to any of these ladies who were there, who were hairdressers, I'm here the rest of the week. If you'd like me to come and visit your salon, I'd love to do that. And, we'd have a translator for you. And then you spend the rest of the week just visiting their salons and talking about, well, how do you build a, faithful clientele, loyal clientele, and what can you do to make the place more attractive? And oh, by the way, while you're doing that, you can leave a Bible with them or share the fact that one of the reasons you think your life and your business is a success is because you have faith in God. I said, "Would you do that? Would you be interested in anything like that, Diane?" "In a minute," she said. "In a minute." Right? This is not a woman who considers herself a missionary, but yet you can use the skill sets to match over there. And then that missionary can follow up on all the contacts. And we can start planting churches among hairdressers. Right? Ordinary. So God is giving the Great Commission back to the lay people. It's not about professional missionaries anymore. Okay, so the new paradigm, the church is having church-based internships, and they're doing training and mentoring in the church. The church is involved in strategies now, right? They're not happy to give that up to the Mission Society. They want to be involved in doing it. And the churches are financially supporting teams, both long and short term. So now, right, when the pastor gets up, it isn't, well, I wonder who is getting that strange and mysterious call. He sees an army of people who all have skills right now that can be used on the mission field. And his job is to motivate, cast vision, and, this is the key one, make those bridges. Right? If I can step in and make that bridge for that hairdresser lady, she'll go. But she's not going to make the bridge. So there's going to need to be leaders who can make those bridges and make those key partnerships to see this happen. The missionary using their natural skill sets to bridge with others in another culture, not leaving their professions behind, taking it with them, and connecting in multiple domains. Veterinarians connecting with veterinarians, and doctors connecting with doctors. I took one friend of mine on a trip to China a couple of years ago. I just wanted somebody to travel with, and this guy had never been overseas. He didn't have a visa, he didn't have a passport, and he was a mortgage guy. And everywhere we went in China, he would ask people about their mortgages. I never asked that, but he made a connection, and I learned so much about how China is changing. And the mortgage, that's most people's largest outlay of money, and it really is a big deal to them. And I just thought, wow, this guy's he's connecting in ways I would never connect as a religious professional. The goal is to then spark rapidly multiplying church planting movements among people in that domain. So what is the mission agency needed for? Okay, back to my story of this guy who trained the missionaries and then planted the team in Turkey. And I said, well, you served the role of the missionary. And he said, no. We need the mission agency for two things. We need them for the cultural expertise, right? We don't know anything about Turkey, but they do. They're there. They're the experts. We needed their cultural, cross-cultural expertise. And we needed them to network. When our team got there, they needed to network with other believers, both national believers and the foreigners who were living there. And we needed the missionary agency to do that. And strangely enough, that's what ChinaSource does. We don't send people to China. You can't go through us. But we are the experts. We know what's going on on the ground in China, and we're the networkers. We're the connectors. And so God is raising up whole new kinds of organizations that are based on partnership, facilitation, based on knowledge and expertise, and based on this ability to network. And it's a whole new organization, and it's really hard to sell. Because people are like, okay, so you're not really a missionary, are you? You don't smuggle Bibles, you're not planting churches, But if you understand this new paradigm, then you see the incredible value of an organization like that. And my vision for one of my 3 visions for the Leadership Center at Faith Seminary is that we be a catalyst for more of that happening around the globe. Okay, so what are the mission agency needed for? Coaching. Right? Coaching. Here you've got this businessman. He wants to go to China. Hey, we'll coach you how to do that. Doing the research. Right? What are the new opportunities? Having that expertise. The networking is a huge one. Encouragement. Assisting sometimes with job placement. And then convening consultations and building those partnerships that are going to make this kind of thing happen. All right. So any questions, comments, rude remarks? I mean, that's a huge shift that is happening. And I've seen it happen in my last 20 years of being involved in missions. When I went in 1982, I wanted to go to China. I approached a traditional mission agency. I was just out of college, did not have a seminary degree. China had just opened, and I had a chance to go and study the language. And they weren't sure what to do with me. So they welcomed me to the candidate course. I went to jump through all the hoops, and at the end, they sat down and they said, "Well, Gary, we love you, and we see God's hand on your life. We are a traditional church planting mission, and you're not going to China to plant churches. So you really can't go with us. Sorry." I was like, China's been closed for how long? Here it's opening. There's a chance for Christians to go in, and you're not going to support that? What's the matter with you? I was just like, okay. Now, as of last year, I got a newsletter from the president of that very same mission organization, and the majority of their missionaries are now considered professional service associates. They are using their skills in missions. But when I went 20 years ago, they had no track for that. They had no vision for that. They had no ability to facilitate that. But they do now. And in fact, the majority of people they send now are in that mode. Big change. And how do we as leaders go to the forefront to be able to affect
It's
that.
changing on so many levels too.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've looked at emergent church, we've looked at marketplace, and we've looked at missions. And the leadership that got us to this point is not going to get us through to the next. There's got to be new kinds of leaders, new thinking, new methods, and the opportunities, though, are incredible. It's a very exciting time to be a Christian leader.
Amen.
Any questions about any of that stuff, particularly the last the mission stuff?
Under your term expertise, is that where the linkage comes for getting the familiarity with the culture and being able to pass that on and doing the training? Or does expertise cover a totally different area?
No, it does that, the training aspect. And we found with our organization that it's particularly powerful to have the ability to network and be kind of known as the experts. So we can bring some experts here and say, hey, come listen to these guys, and these people will come. And then we network them all. If we were just networkers without really being seen as having any particular expertise, it would be much less effective with an organization. So we found, and I know some people now who are trying to start networks and partnerships that really don't have much of a level of expertise, and they're really having a hard time. So I think it's particularly potent to have both of them together in a facilitated kind of organization.
I see the part of it that says now instead of just being ordained using the ordinary, now because we're kind of back to the plan of using ordinary people to do extraordinary things, you know.
Amen. Yep. Now, some people in the missions community are lamenting this. They're calling it the re-amateurization of missions. I don't see it that way. I guess so. I don't see it at all. I see it as an incredibly exciting time that we're moving into. All right. So